Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries, the channel where we usually talk about Bigfoot. Or, if you want to call it Sasquatch, we'll call it that as well. But in today's video, we're going to talk about something different. Just because yesterday I was actually talking to Ben. We were having a recording session, long range over Skype, over the internet. And we were making a video for Patreon about aliens and UFOs. But after we were finished our conversation, we actually kept talking, and in our conversation, we just started talking about other creepy stories from, back when we were younger. And during that discussion, Ben told me the most incredible, terrifying stories from his childhood when he lived in a house that was incredibly haunted. And when I say incredibly haunted, I mean like the stuff that happened to him and his family is stuff that you would see in a horror movie. Now, Ben lives across the pond in the UK, and there's lots of famous hauntings and cases of paranormal activity in the UK. I think the most famous, or one of the most famous cases, is the Enfield poltergeist, which, if you don't know what the Enfield poltergeist is, it's the case that they actually made into a movie called The Conjuring 2. So while Ben and I were talking and kind of just finishing up our conversation, the video was still recording, so I ended up recording all of his stories, and it wasn't really intended to be made into a video, but I thought the stories were so good, and Ben is so good at telling stories that, it'd be great to post that on my YouTube channel for you guys to listen to, and I highly recommend listening to the whole thing. It takes a few minutes in this video clip to actually get into Ben's stories, but, I recommend watching the whole thing and, hearing what kind of crazy paranormal stuff actually goes on in a house that is actually really haunted. So yeah, this is just kind of a random video that doesn't have anything to do with Bigfoot, but I thought you guys would be interested in hearing anyways. So without further ado, here are Ben's childhood ghost stories. Dude, one time, I used to know this guy, years ago, and he used to live, on the west coast of Canada. He told me that when he was, 11 or 12 or something, him and one kid were walking home late at night, and on the west coast it's a lot of forest, and it's pretty much if you imagine Bigfoot territory. It's just temperate rainforest. And he said that one night they were walking down this road and there's forest on both sides, and they both heard something in the bushes beside them, almost as if whatever it was walking along parallel with them. And he said that they looked in the woods and saw an extremely tall, really lanky, scrawny being walking through the trees beside them.
Oh no.
Almost like a black silhouette, because it was at night. But they said, he's dude, it was 10 or 12 feet tall.
Yeah, that is terrifying.
Creeping along.
Yeah, but I hear about these stories all the time, and you do as well. People seeing really strange things, and me and you laugh it off. Me and you say that's bullshit. Example, dogmen, all this kind of stuff. We just don't believe it because there is not enough evidence, and we are very scientifically minded. We're logical thinkers. But then there's another part of me that's thinking, but what if? What happens if there is so many different things on this planet that come and go from time to time, or just exist here full time, that we don't know about? And like you say, maybe slipping from dimension to dimension. Who's to say that these things aren't happening and people are having these experiences? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm sure that if I tell my story to people, there'll be people out there that say that's bullshit. But for me, it's real because I know what I saw. And I sometimes think, I wonder if people that are out there talking about dogmen or Bigfoot and these other weird creatures that have been seen, I wonder if those people are feeling the same way I do. Well, I can tell you, but you won't believe me. But I know it happened for me. That's real for me.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. I mean, you've had paranormal experiences, but there'll be people out there, if you try and tell that to them, they've not had them experiences. They won't listen. They don't believe it. Yeah. But for you, it's real.
Yeah, definitely.
What are your paranormal experiences? Anyway, I've never heard your paranormal experiences, I think.
I've made videos about them before. If you go way back to the earlier videos.
Yeah.
There's one video I can send you where me and my friends are basically sharing all our experiences, but I've seen a full body apparition before.
Oh yeah.
In front of me.
And what facial features, or is it just the outline?
just a white shape, like a cookie cutter shape of a man.
Wow.
Dude, it was terrifying. It was terrifying. I was 9. And I'll never get the image of it out of my head. Like, I have the
Where
image
was
in my
that?
It was like, this is back, my parents split up when I was like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And so my dad was living in a different house, and it was at his house, and there was a walk-in closet in the master bedroom, and the door was open, and I was sleeping in that bedroom when I was like 9. I went to visit my dad, and I woke up randomly in the middle of the night, and it was just standing right in the doorway
Oh
of the
no.
closet,
Oh
just
no.
watching. Yeah, dude, it was unbelievable.
And there's no denying that is exactly what you saw. Like,
No denying.
oh my god. Did your dad stay in that house much longer after?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He didn't
And
believe
did you?
me.
He must have had experiences. I always think this, like the people that live there must know this, but maybe they're in denial. Like maybe they don't want to believe it.
I don't know. The weird thing is, when we were really little kids, we had actually lived in that house like before, and
Yeah,
then we moved, and then when my parents split up, my dad moved back into that house.
yeah. I
But
think that like
it wasn't
about the
like
house.
it wasn't like an old house or anything.
No, no, they don't always have to be, do they? Like sometimes it's more about the land that they're built on. Like I think that all the time about the house I grew up in. That house has been through so many different hands since we left. Like it's been up for sale. Like nobody ever stays in the house longer than like 3 years. And yeah, I've always wanted to contact some of these people and just say, like, out of curiosity, like, why did you leave? Like, but it's how do you say that without sounding like a psychopath?
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out though.
Yeah, it really would. That house was terrifying, dude. That house was so terrifying. Like, honestly, to the point where, and Carrie would tell you the same. Like, and so would like my ex Haley and everyone that I've been with would tell you the same. To the point where it's affected me now more than I ever imagined. Like, I wake up sometimes on a night, hot sweats, absolutely terrified, because I have dreams sometimes that I'm back in the house, and the dreams make no sense, but it's absolutely terrifying. Like the experience that we all lived through in the house is like something out of a film. Absolutely
Really?
crazy. Honestly, it's like I've been trying to get my brother to do a Zoom call with me and sit down and chat about our experiences, but he won't do it. Like he's a bit timid and he's scared of talking on camera and stuff. But if I could get him to open up about some of his experiences and some of the joint experiences that we had, I think it'd make a great video. But he just won't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was literally like something out of a film. Terrifying.
Like, what were the couple of the
And
craziest things that happened?
oh, I love talking about this house. I really do. So like in films when you watch like a horror film, and they always have this progression. It starts off with like somebody, the main character, seeing like a shadow fly by the wall, and then they hear like a bang, and it progresses, doesn't it? And then eventually it starts talking and it starts throwing things, and it becomes more violent steadily. That is exactly how this thing panned out. So I started, basically I was the first person to see anything in that house when I was really, really small. And the first experience was my mum was going upstairs to get into the bath, and my brother and sister were at school. It was roughly about the time when they were going to be finishing and coming back home. So my mum had said to me, Ben, I'm going to be going in the bath. I'll be locking the bathroom door just in case your brother and sister come running in. Do you want to sit downstairs and carry on watching telly, or do you want to go upstairs and play with your toys? So I was like, I'll watch telly. So she went upstairs, she got in the bath, locked the door. I'm sat on the sofa watching the TV, and it was the old style TVs. You'll remember these. Like, they don't just go black when you turn them off, they fizzle out with the black and white static. And so after about 10-15 minutes of watching, I thought, actually I will go upstairs, I'm quite bored. So I jumped off the sofa and knelt down in front of the TV, and I pressed the button. The screen started to come up with static as it fizzled out to a black screen. And I'm sat there watching this screen, and I noticed that some of the speckles had disappeared. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, watching this, turned it back on, turned it back off, thinking, what the hell's going on here? And where this object was, this glowing white object in the shape of a human being, was roughly stood at the living room door behind me. So I'm now kneeling in front of the TV, looking in the reflection of this object stood at the doorway behind me. So I get up, I carry on looking at the TV. I don't ever look over at that point. I just carry on looking in the TV and walk back to the sofa and sit down. And I don't know why I didn't instantly look over there. I just didn't. But it started to shimmer, and I could see it in the TV, and it started to grow larger and larger and larger. And I'm thinking, what the hell? And now it's actually coming to like my peripheral vision, and I can see this thing. And I quickly just turn my head, and it just glides straight across the floor, up into my face. I scrambled up the back of the sofa so fast. I tried to scream, nothing would come out. I'm kicking the cushions all on the floor. I jump off the end of the sofa and run upstairs. Start braying hell on the bathroom door. Mum, trying to scream for my mum. And she always, when we talk about this now, she'll always say, like, it was terrifying. Like, you was terrified. Like, something had really badly happened to you. And I started telling my mum that something had floated across the floor, went into, like, up into my face. And that was the first experience. And then everybody over the years had experiences, like friends of the family, people that came around to look after the dog when we was on holiday. Everyone had a story to tell. I think one of the scariest ones, my dad had some terrifying experiences. He said that when my mum and dad was going through a divorce, my mum had moved out at this point. I was living with my mum, and my brother and sister were older, so they already had their own places. And my dad was in the house when they eventually got back together. He told me the story, and he said that it was the first time that he was in the house on his own. So he'd gone downstairs, he'd locked all the doors up, shut all the windows, and made sure everywhere was locked up for the night. He'd gone back to bed, and he'd recently just had new carpets laid in the house. So he went into his bedroom, he climbed into bed, pulled the cover over him, and he's lied there trying to drift off to sleep. And about 10-15 minutes later, he heard the door of the bedroom push against the freshly laid carpet, that very distinctive sound of door pushing against carpet. So he said that now all my senses are just going through the roof. I'm alert, my adrenaline's going like mad because I'm thinking, who the hell is in the house? Like, there's only me. He's thinking there's an intruder, basically. So he lies there, facing away from the door, and he hears pressure being applied to the carpet, coming down the side of his bed and stop at the foot of the bed. And he said that no amount of money, for the love of God, nothing was going to get me to sit up in that bed and look at what was standing there. So I said to him, like, oh my God, Dad, that's terrifying. Like, what did you do? And he basically just said that I didn't do anything. I stayed there and I looked at that wall until the sun came up through the window the next morning. And then when I got up the next morning, the bedroom door had been pushed too, like on the carpet. Someone had come in and pushed it. It was still like that, but there was no one in the house. Absolutely terrifying experiences just like that. And this thing started to speak, like, Justin, this thing is crazy. It started to speak, like, so my dad was have I told you all these before, I think, have I?
I don't think so.
No. So my dad was a long distance lorry driver, and he used to work long hours up and down the country driving articulated lorries. And so he'd always come home at a time when everybody else was in bed, like early hours in the morning. And my dad said that he could never just come home, kick his boots off and jump straight to bed. It didn't work like that because his mind was still active. So he used to go into the kitchen first, put the kettle on, get a cup of tea, relax for a little bit, and then go to bed. And he said that he'd come home, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, gone into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and he bent down in the fridge to get the milk out. And he said that as clear as day, as clear as I'm talking to you right now, somebody over my left ear, a female, said, "Gary." That's my dad's name, Gary. And he said, "I heard it. No one's going to tell me otherwise. I know exactly what I heard." And he said, for a matter of fact, it was that clear, I almost answered it because I thought it was your mum. I thought your mum had got up through the night because she'd heard me come in, and I almost turned around and went, "What?" And he said, but I didn't. He said, I stayed bent down in that fridge. All the hairs on the back of my neck went up, and it was the most terrifying feeling that he's ever had. He said, but he stood up. There was nobody in the house. Your mum was fast asleep. Everybody else was fast asleep. Yet this thing knew his name, like, and he said it stayed with him for ages. Like, he couldn't get his head around it. Like, how does this thing know my name? Well, his mum had recently passed, and so had his sister. So obviously my first thought was it your mum or was it your sister? And he said, no, definitely not. It was neither of my mum, and it wasn't my sister. It wasn't a voice that I'm familiar with, but it was a woman's voice who knew my name. And yeah, like, he was really shook up by that. And I know he was shook up by that because the next morning when I got up to go to school, my dad would normally be in bed by that point. So as I'm getting up, putting my school bag on, I look into the kitchen and my dad sat there, white as a ghost. And he told me later on that night what had happened. And he basically said to me, I just need to ask you something. Have you ever heard anything? Has anyone ever? And I was like, no, never ever. Because at this point, everybody was talking about the ghost in the house. And I was like, that's never happened to me. He was like, well, I'm telling you now, it happened to me. And he said, absolutely terrified. He said it was a woman's voice, blah, blah, blah. But scary as hell. Like, does that mean this thing's been watching him? Does it know who he is? Like, so scary to think.
Yeah. Did you get the sense of what you saw was like female?
Yeah. And my next door neighbours, the people that lived next door, they were a real elderly couple. So they obviously knew the people that lived there before we moved in. And they were saying there was an old woman called Mrs. Bates, and she was a very religious woman. And she often had the priest come around, the local priest, that would sit in the front living room. He'd bring biscuits round, they'd sit and talk in the front living room. And what happened was Mrs. Bates was really, really old. And her son was going away on holiday, and he said, look, Mum, I'm going away on holiday. I won't be around to look after you as much, but I'll make sure I check on you as soon as I get back. And when he came back, he tried to get into the house, but he couldn't open the door. So he left her a little note saying, Mum, I've been around to check on you. There was no sign. Let me know you're okay when you get this, kind of thing. Posted it, and when he lifted the letterbox up, he saw his mum dead at the bottom of the stairs. She'd fallen from the top to the bottom, and no one was able to get to her in time. So she died she's one person that we know who died in the house. Somebody else, there's stories of somebody else choking to death in the front living room. So that's two. But yeah, it was just a crazy place.
Wow. Anything else like worth noting?
Yeah, loads. So I have an auntie called Jane, and whenever we went on family holidays, Jane would always go into the house and basically let the dog out, because obviously we need someone to look after the dog. So we're on holiday, family holiday, we're in Spain, and my mum gets a phone call. It's my auntie Jane. She's frantic, and she's crying and she's sobbing, and my mum's going, just calm down, Jane. I can't hear what you're saying. Calm down. What's happened? And I need to leave. I need to leave now. I'm going. I'm not coming back. You're gonna have to get someone else to come let your dog out. What she said when she eventually calmed down was that she'd gone upstairs to go to the toilet, and halfway up the stairs she couldn't get past. I said, my mum said, what do you mean you couldn't get past? I couldn't get past the stairs. There was something holding me back, and every time I tried to take a step up, I was getting pushed back. My mum was like, this is making no sense, Jane. Like, what is going on? She's like, I'm telling you, I'm not going around to the house. You're going to have to get someone else to look after the dog. I'm not going back in. But she said that she couldn't get any further, like halfway up the stairs. Someone was pushing her physically back on the next step, down the next step. She said, I tried and I tried and I tried. And eventually, realization kicked in that someone was pushing me that I couldn't see. And so I ran out of the house. I left the front door open, and I've come home. So, yeah, we had to get in touch with the neighbours and say, look, will you let the dog out? Because, yeah, absolutely weird things. My mum was on a night out. This is, again, another situation that used to happen. My mum used to smoke at this point, and she was going drinking with a few girlfriends to a few pubs, and she was looking for cigs everywhere. Like, has anyone seen my cigarettes? Like, no, I haven't seen them. Where did you put them? I put them on the side. I know I put them on the side. So she's looking around for the cigs. Everyone's going to all the rooms. She's going through her handbag. She's looking on the sides, opening the drawers. No cigs to be found. She'd only just bought them, so she knows that this full pack of 20 cigs was just put on the side recently. As they're on the way out of the house, my mum just has one quick glimpse into the room to see she's left them on the sofa, and standing in the middle of the living room floor, upright, is the pack of 26. Like, and everybody was just like, what? This is impossible. Like, there's no way that any of us would have put them there in that position for a start, and we would definitely wouldn't have missed them. Another time, family holiday again. We go away for 2 weeks. Can't remember where we went this time. I think it was Greece. We came back. Every family photo of me, my mum, dad, and brother and sister was turned backwards. On the mantelpiece, on the TV, every one of them was turned backwards, facing the wall, so you couldn't see the photos. And just
no way.
Yeah, absolutely terrifying.
That's right out of a movie, dude.
Honestly, like, and the thing is, you got to try to imagine this. So, like, as a child, I used to look to my dad because he's quite a strong guy. I used to look to my dad for like reassurance, and I've seen my dad terrified from something that he couldn't explain, and that really scared me growing up. Like, I used to look at my dad and think he's freaking out. Like, he's really it was a state of anxiety continuously in that house. And my brother had his own experiences. Like everybody had experiences in the house. I remember a guy called Nathan Kamara at school, a black kid called Nathan Kamara, and we used to play for the same football team. And every now and then, after a game, he'd come around to the house. We'd go on the field, we'd get drinks and food from my house, whatever. And he'd come round after a football game. We sat at the kitchen table, and the drawer in the kitchen with all the knives and forks just flew across the floor. Knives and forks went everywhere, and we just both like absolutely like shit ourselves. We just jumped up like, what the hell? And I remember that because years and years later, when you know how it is when you leave school, you drift apart, you don't see each other anymore. But whenever I'd go around town or I'd go to a pub, if I ever saw him, he'd always go, "Oh Ben, I'd seen you for years. Do you remember that time when we was at your house in the drawer?" And he used to tell the story. I was like, yeah, I remember. It was one of the things that like a talking point that everyone would talk about my house. It was really, really scary. My brother saw a little girl sat at the end of the bed. The dog as well was terrorized continuously. Like that dog, the golden Labrador that we had, he had a bad life. Like he never enjoyed living in the house ever. I can only imagine what he went through. Like this was at the same time roughly when I was telling you we had new carpets laid. My mum made a very strict rule. She was like, I don't want the dog going upstairs. The dog can stay downstairs, he can go in the garden, but I don't want the dog going up and down on the new carpets. So the dog never would, like, and we'd never let him. But one time, there was only me and my brother in the house, and the dog starts scratching on the kitchen door. And I'm like, Gaz, like, the dog needs to go out for a shit. Go let the dog out. He's like, I'm not doing it. Like, I did it last. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So he's growling, he's snarling, he's really scratching on the door. I'm like, Jesus, he must need the toilet bad. As soon as I open the kitchen door, he barges past me and runs straight upstairs, something that was totally out of character. Like, he would never have done that. Up the new carpets and into the bedroom where me and my brother would sleep. I chased after him. My brother's running up after me, behind me. And on the bedroom floor, the dog is now crouched, looking under the bed. Every tooth in his head was showing. He was growling. He was literally like he was about to savage somebody. And he was looking at something under the bed. Me and my brother couldn't see anything. Like, I don't understand what the dog had seen, why he did that, but there was something there that he obviously sensed and we didn't. But yeah, very strange. Did I tell you about the time that my brother tried to contact the owners? So we're sat round at my brother's house, like this is years after we'd left this place, and as always is the case, we start talking about some of the scary times in the house. And my brother's like, do you know what you need to do? You need to make a video for your channel about like that house and going back there and maybe contacting the people that live there. And I was like, I can't do that, that's crazy. Like, he's like, I'm gonna have a quick search now and see who it is that lives there. So he's trying to go on Facebook, he's trying to look at all these different people that live in the area and stuff. And he brought up a page that can give you the history of the house, how much it last sold for, who lived there, how long they lived there. And we looked at it, and the house, since we left, had been up for sale like 8 or 9 times. And each person that had lived in it had never stayed longer than 3 years. And we're like, oh man, that's creepy. Like, that's got to have something to do with it. So the last people that lived there, or the last people that stayed there the longest, was because they wasn't actually living in the house. They turned it into a nursery, a day nursery. So my brother found out the name of this day nursery and the person that runs it. And he was like, I'm going to send her a message. I'm like, don't send her a message. That's weird as hell. What are you even going to say to start with? He said, no, I'll word it nice. I'll say something like, used to live there, had some really good memories, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay, I'm not down with this, but whatever, it sounds good, do it. So he fires this Facebook message off to this woman, and they get, basically he says in the message something along the lines of, just out of curiosity, have you ever experienced anything in the house? He worded it better than that. When he worded it back to me, it sounded better than that, but it was something along them lines. And I kid you not, mate, as soon as he pressed send, bing, message came back, like literally straight away. And he was like, shit, she's messaged back. And I was like, already, you just sent it. He was like, I know. We opened this message on Facebook and it said, you don't scare me. I was like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? Like, if somebody messaged me out of the blue saying, have you experienced something strange in the house? I would be like what? What are you talking about? What should I have experienced? You'd be asking but this message just said, you don't scare me. And I said, right, quickly send another message back. He wrote a message out, went to send it, blocked. Couldn't find this
What?
person ever again. Couldn't find this person ever again on Facebook. Nowhere to be found. Just weird as hell. We was like, what does that even mean? Does that mean that they have experienced something? Was that the entity writing that message? What does this mean? Like, so weird.
Maybe she
Yeah.
was having experiences, and then she was in the middle of having experiences, and you sent the message, and it freaked her out.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I said to my brother, like, would you not have asked questions if somebody randomly just messaged you? Would you not be saying, what should I have been experiencing? Like, what thing is he talking about? It just seems a bit of a weird response, like, you don't scare me. And that was it, blocked. Strange,
That's
yeah.
super weird. Those are all terrifying.
Honestly, the house, wherever you went, the atmosphere was so thick, it literally, you could feel it. Like, it literally felt as if you was in a stadium and everybody had just turned to stare at you. Like, that's how it felt. It felt like you were being watched wherever you went. Really, really creepy. Yeah, that opened my eyes a lot, that did, living there. Which is weird, because you'd have thought that would have been what my channel was about. But I think what stuck with me the most is the extraterrestrial. I don't know why that is, but yeah. Like your experience as well though, like you know yourself, when you see something, like you said you saw that figure in the cupboard, nobody's going to tell you any different. Like I can sit here and
Oh,
say, yeah, I can sit here and say, yeah, but are you sure it was that? Could it not have been the light? You know, like you know what you saw was what you saw.
yeah. Yeah, there's no mistaking it, and I'll never get the image out of my head of what I saw.
What did it do? Did it just stand there, or how did
It stood there, and it was watching me, and I was lying on my back in the bed, facing it, watching it. And I eventually gained the courage. Like at first I could not move. I was terrified. But eventually I gained the courage to run out of the room. I jumped out of bed and ran out of the room.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Could you tell whether it was male, female? Was it tall?
all I had I believe it was a male just because I had the sense that it was.
Yeah.
It just looked very imposing and had a powerful stance. And
Was it actually in the
intimidating.
cupboard?
It was in a walk-in closet, in the doorway of a big closet.
Dude, that is so scary. Out of
Yeah.
all the places it could have been, like, why did it have to be in the closet? That's the scariest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So was
freaky.
so you was asleep, right? Like this was the nighttime. So
I was asleep.
I'm assuming the room was dark.
Yeah.
So
Whatever lights, there was probably street lights outside, and
was
there's
this thing
probably a
glowing?
little bit of ambient. Yeah, it was white.
Oh no. You see, like I describe what I saw as like a heat wave. You know when you look down the road on a hot day and you see the shimmer of the heat wave? If you turned that vertically and like cookie cutter shaped it into a human, that's what I saw. It was like a shimmering heat wave glowing of a person's shape. Yeah, very strange.
Yeah, this didn't have that effect. It was like solid white.
I wonder what it would have done if you'd have just stayed there.
I don't know, dude.
Did you have like
That's why
the feeling
I don't think it was sleep paralysis because I got out of the room.
and ran? Yeah, I don't think it's sleep paralysis. Wow, that's terrifying. I'd love to know the backstory to that. Like, who lived there? Like, what is that? What is going on?
Yeah, like I said, it wasn't an old place at all. I think it was relatively new.
Did anybody else have experiences at all, like, in that place? No?
No, not that I know of.
So weird.